When did your best friend decide they were your enemy? I was pulled out of class by the principal, who asked to speak with me privately. He said this was an urgent meeting, and if I refused, I would be expelled immediately. I immediately knew this was about Briley. She and I had been inseparable for 16 years, and last month she got pregnant. Her parents flipped out when they found out. They wanted her to get an abortion and threatened to kick her out if she kept the baby, so Briley moved in with her grandmother. I spent every day after school with her looking at baby name websites and helping her every way I could. But something weird happened at lunch the day before the principal came to get me. Our friend Tiara pulled me aside and whispered that someone should push Briley down the stairs so she would miscarry. She said it would solve all of Briley's problems and her parents would take her back. I told Tiara, "You're not Dr. Doom," that was the most messed up thing I'd ever heard, and she needed to stay away from Briley if she was thinking like that. Well, Principal Porter led me to the conference room, and that's where I saw Briley sitting at the table sobbing. Tiara was there too. 2 police officers stood by the door and my legs started shaking. Briley wouldn't look at me and kept her hands pressed against her small baby bump like she was protecting it. Before I could ask what was happening, Tiara started talking. She told everyone I'd come to her with a plan to push Briley down the stairs. She said I was jealous that Briley was getting all this attention for being pregnant. She claimed I'd been talking about it for days, and even researched which staircase would cause the most damage so her belly would go splat. My mouth fell open as Tiara kept lying. She showed them text messages that were completely taken out of context. The one where I said, "That's terrible," in response to her suggestion now looked like I was agreeing with something. She'd deleted her own messages about pushing Briley and made it seem like I brought up the whole idea. Briley suddenly erupted and started hitting Tiara with her notebook. She was screaming that Tiara was a liar and trying to hurt her baby. The officers had to separate them while Principal Porter tried to restore order. Tiara had tears streaming down her face, acting like she was traumatized by having to report her friend's violent plans. I tried to explain what really happened, but nobody would let me talk. Every time I opened my mouth, Principal Porter held up his hand and said we needed to wait for my parents. I kept looking at Briley, hoping she would tell them the truth, but she was hyperventilating and couldn't catch her breath. The school nurse had to come check her blood pressure. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and stood up to speak. I told them about Tiara's actual suggestion at lunch and how I'd defended Briley. I explained that Tiara must have been jealous or crazy to make up these lies. I begged Briley to remember all our years of friendship and tell them I would never hurt her or her baby. Briley finally looked at me with red, swollen eyes. For a second, I thought she was going to tell the truth. Then she opened her mouth and said she didn't know what to believe anymore. She said I'd been acting weird since she got pregnant, and maybe Tiara was right. My best friend of 16 years was choosing to believe lies over everything we'd been through together. Principal Porter stood up and said they had to take this threat seriously. "You need to pick up your things because the police are here to escort you out," he said. "You pose a threat to the baby, and we can't allow you near Briley or on school grounds until this is resolved." I stood in shock. And that night, my phone buzzed with a text. Tiara sent me a smiley face. I sat on my bed staring at that smiley face for what felt like hours. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I kept reading it over and over like maybe I'd misunderstood. Downstairs, I could hear my parents' voices getting louder. Mom was saying something about how the school had to be wrong, and Dad kept asking if maybe I needed help. The word help made my stomach turn because I knew what he meant. He thought maybe I really had planned to hurt Briley and her baby. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to block out everything, but the images from that conference room kept playing in my head. Briley's face when she said she didn't know what to believe anymore. The way Principal Porter looked at me like I was dangerous. Those police officers standing by the door ready to grab me if I tried anything. My phone lit up again with another notification, but I couldn't look at it. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs and Mom pushed open my door without knocking. She sat down on the edge of my bed and didn't say anything at first. Her face looked tired and worried, but not angry. She asked me to tell her everything from the very beginning. I started with lunch yesterday when Tiara pulled me aside and whispered about pushing Briley down the stairs. Mom's eyes got wider as I explained how Tiara said it would solve all Briley's problems and her parents would take her back. I told her how I'd said that was the most messed up thing I'd ever heard. When I showed Mom the smiley face text, her whole face changed. She grabbed my phone and took a screenshot, then said we needed to document everything right now while it was fresh. The next morning, I woke up to my phone going crazy with notifications. Screenshots of Tiara's version were spreading through every group chat I was in. People from elementary school were calling me a monster. Someone said I should be in jail. Another person posted that they always knew something was wrong with me. I turned off my phone but knew the damage was already spreading everywhere. Dad came home early from work carrying a thick envelope from the school. His face was pale as he handed it to me. The letter said I was under emergency removal pending a disciplinary hearing. It listed potential consequences including permanent expulsion and criminal charges for making threats against a pregnant student. My stomach dropped when I read the hearing wouldn't be for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks of everyone thinking I wanted to hurt my best friend's baby. Mom made me sit at the kitchen table with a notebook and write down everything I remembered from lunch with Tiara. I wrote every single word I could remember, including how she'd looked around first to make sure nobody was listening. Mom helped me check my phone for messages between me and Tiara. But something weird happened. Our entire text history from the past week was completely gone. The only messages left were the ones Tiara had shown at the school where I said, "That's terrible," with no context. It looked exactly like I was agreeing with some plan. Mom's face got hard, and she said someone had tampered with evidence. I tried calling Briley, but her number went straight to voicemail. Then I remembered she was staying with her grandmother, so I looked up that number. It rang 4 times before going to the answering machine. I left a message saying I would never hurt Briley or her baby, and begging her grandmother to help Briley remember our 16 years of friendship. The silence after I hung up felt like another betrayal. Nobody was going to help me. 3 days passed with me stuck at home while everyone else was at the school spreading lies about me. Then an email showed up about counseling services available during my removal from the school. Mom read it over my shoulder and said it might help to have someone official documenting my side of the story. We scheduled an appointment with someone named Hallie Green for the next day. Mom drove me to the district office where Hallie worked. She turned out to be younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with curly hair and kind eyes. She actually listened without interrupting while I told her everything. She helped me organize my thoughts into a clear timeline and suggested ways to deal with the anxiety that had been keeping me awake every night. She also mentioned that preserving evidence would be crucial for my hearing and asked if I had any proof of what really happened. I showed her the smiley face text, and she made copies of everything. Meanwhile at the school, according to texts from people who still talk to me, Tiara was playing the traumatized hero who saved Briley's baby. She posted crying videos on social media about how hard it was to report her friend, but she had to protect the innocent. Every post got hundreds of likes and comments calling her brave. People were sharing her posts with messages about standing up against violence. Each notification made me feel more hopeless about anyone ever believing the truth. Then something unexpected happened. Kaido Perkins from my computer science class sent me a private message. He said he knew about data recovery and noticed some things didn't add up in Tiara's story. He didn't take sides, but offered to help me try to retrieve the deleted messages if I still had my phone. It was the first glimpse of hope I'd had since this nightmare started. The next day, I texted Kaido back and we agreed to meet at the public library since I couldn't go anywhere near school property. I got there early and found a quiet corner table away from other people. Kaido showed up carrying his laptop bag and sat down across from me without saying much. He pulled out his computer and asked to see my phone, then started explaining how deleted texts might still exist in phone backups or cloud storage. He showed me settings I'd never even looked at before. We spent the next 2 hours going through every menu and option on my phone, checking for automatic backups I didn't know existed. My hands were shaking when he found something in my iCloud settings from 5 days ago. The backup started restoring and I watched the progress bar inch forward while my stomach twisted into knots. When it finished, Kaido helped me navigate to the restored messages, and there it was. A partial conversation with Tiara where she clearly wrote, "Someone should push her down the stairs." The message wasn't complete, but it showed her suggesting the idea first, not me. I almost cried seeing actual proof that I wasn't crazy or lying. Kaido took screenshots of everything with the proper timestamps showing when each message was sent. He made sure to capture the metadata too, explaining that courts and schools needed to see the technical details to know it was real. We saved everything to 3 different places just to be safe. That night at dinner, my parents started arguing about whether we needed a lawyer. Mom had been calling around all day and the prices were insane, like thousands of dollars just to start. Dad kept saying it was just a school hearing, not a real court, so maybe we didn't need to spend that kind of money. He thought we should just accept whatever punishment the school gave and move on with our lives. Mom slammed her fork down and said she wasn't going to let her kid get labeled as someone who threatened a pregnant girl. The tension got so thick I could barely eat. I felt guilty watching them fight about money because of me. 2 days later, I got a Facebook message from Natalie Stone, who worked on the yearbook staff. She said she'd been in the bathroom stall during lunch when Tiara made her suggestion about pushing Briley. She heard the whole thing, including my response telling Tiara she was messed up. Natalie had been scared to come forward because she didn't want to get involved, but seeing Tiara play victim on social media made her sick. She agreed to write a statement about what she heard, but wanted to stay anonymous if possible. I forwarded everything to my mom, who printed it out for our growing file of evidence. The next morning, I worked with Hallie to write a formal request to the school, asking them to examine Tiara's actual phone, not just her screenshots. Hallie helped me word it professionally, explaining how digital evidence could be manipulated and edited. We requested that the school preserve all relevant evidence and conduct a proper investigation. Hallie submitted it through official channels since I wasn't allowed on the school property. 3 days later, we got the school's response and I wanted to scream. They said Tiara had declined to provide her device, claiming she'd dropped it and the screen was damaged beyond use. They said the screenshots she already provided were sufficient evidence for the disciplinary hearing. The unfairness of it made me want to punch something, but Hallie reminded me to stay focused on what we could control. She said getting angry would only make me look guilty. That weekend, a man named Owen Carter called our house. He worked for a student rights nonprofit and had heard about my case from Natalie, who'd reached out to them. Owen explained that schools often violated due process in these situations, and most families didn't know their rights. He offered to help us for free since that's what his organization did. Finally, we had someone who understood the system and could fight back properly. Owen came to our house the next day with a thick folder of information. He helped us file a formal complaint about how the school was handling evidence and requested specific procedures for the hearing. He also demanded that the school provide copies of all evidence against me, which they'd been refusing to do. The school reluctantly sent over Tiara's screenshots, and Owen immediately noticed something weird. The metadata on her screenshots showed inconsistent creation dates, like some were made days after she claimed to receive them. He documented everything and added it to our complaint. Meanwhile, rumors started spreading that Briley had some kind of health scare and almost lost the baby from all the stress. I desperately wanted to call her or go see her, but knew any contact would violate the no-contact order and make everything worse. Instead, I spent hours writing her a letter that focused only on hoping she and the baby were okay. I didn't mention the case or try to defend myself, just told her I was thinking about them and wanted them both to be healthy. Hallie agreed to deliver my letter through proper channels so there wouldn't be any violation of the order. She came back the next day saying Briley's grandmother had accepted the letter, but made no promises about whether Briley would actually read it. At least it wasn't thrown away or rejected completely, which felt like a tiny bit of progress in this nightmare. Kaido texted me later that day with screenshots that made my hands shake. He'd been going through Tiara's Instagram and found a post from the exact time she claimed I was sending her threats about pushing Briley. The photo showed her at the mall holding shopping bags with a timestamp that proved she was lying about when our conversation happened. We saved everything to 3 different flash drives and printed copies too, because I wasn't taking any chances with evidence disappearing again. Kaido kept digging through her social media and found more contradictions, like her posting about being at a movie when she said I was harassing her in the library. Each screenshot got added to our growing folder of proof that her timeline was completely made up. 2 days later, the school finally sent the official hearing notice and my stomach dropped when I saw the date. They scheduled it for Monday morning, which gave us only the weekend to get ready. Owen came over that night and ran practice questions with me for 3 hours straight. He'd ask something and I'd answer. Then he'd tell me how to say it better without getting emotional or defensive. Mom went through my closet looking for appropriate clothes while Dad sat at the kitchen table finally saying he was proud of how I was handling everything. The change in his attitude made me tear up, but I couldn't afford to fall apart now. Natalie showed up Saturday morning with a copy of the student handbook that she'd highlighted and tabbed. She found the exact policy stating that in disciplinary cases involving digital evidence, both parties had to provide equal access to their devices for verification. The fact that Tiara refused to hand over her phone while I gave mine immediately was a direct violation of school policy. Owen took notes on everything Natalie found and added it to our formal arguments for the hearing. He said this could be the key to showing the school wasn't following their own rules. That afternoon, Hallie called with a message from Briley's grandmother that made me sit down hard on my bed. She wanted me to know that Briley was confused and scared, but physically okay with the baby still healthy. More importantly, she mentioned that Briley had been asking questions about the evidence and whether Tiara's story made sense. It wasn't much, but hearing that Briley might be starting to doubt the lies gave me the first real hope I'd felt in weeks. The next day, everything got worse when Owen forwarded me new screenshots that Tiara had submitted to the school. She was now claiming I'd been harassing her through fake social media accounts, and included messages that were supposedly from me threatening her for telling the truth. But she made a huge mistake because one of the messages referenced something that happened after the school took my phone and laptop. Owen immediately documented how it was impossible for me to send that message when I didn't even have access to any devices. He called it a smoking gun that proved she was fabricating evidence. Thursday afternoon, Owen got a call that changed everything. 2 students had contacted the administration with concerns about Tiara's behavior in previous situations. Apparently, she'd made false accusations against other people before, though nothing this serious or involving pregnancy. One girl said Tiara accused her of stealing money from her locker, until security footage proved Tiara never had money there at all. The principal agreed to consider this pattern of behavior as relevant to my case. Kaido spent all weekend at his computer creating a presentation that would explain the technical evidence to people who didn't understand technology. He made charts showing how metadata worked and visual timelines proving when Tiara's screenshots were really created versus when she claimed to receive the messages. He color-coded everything and made it so simple that anyone could follow along. Watching him work so hard to help someone he barely knew made me realize how many people actually believed in my innocence. Sunday night arrived and I couldn't sleep at all thinking about facing everyone at the hearing. My mind kept racing through worst-case scenarios where they wouldn't believe our evidence or Tiara would come up with new lies. Mom came into my room at 2 a.m. and found me pacing back and forth. She sat on my bed and told me about her own experience in college when a professor accused her of cheating on a paper. She'd had to go before an academic board and prove she wrote it herself by showing all her research notes and rough drafts. The way she fought back and won gave me strength to face Monday. She stayed with me until the sun came up just talking about random things to keep my mind off the hearing. Monday morning, my whole body felt like it was vibrating with nerves as we walked into the school building for the first time in weeks. The conference room where this nightmare started looked exactly the same with the long table and uncomfortable chairs. Principal Porter was already there, along with 2 assistant principals I recognized, and a woman in a suit who Owen said was from the district office. Tiara sat on the opposite side with her parents, who kept whispering to her while she stared at the table. She wouldn't look at me at all, which Owen said was a good sign because guilty people avoid eye contact. We took our seats and Owen arranged all our evidence folders in front of him, while Kaido set up his laptop for the presentation. The panel started by reading the formal charges against me, and asking if I understood the seriousness of the allegations. Owen spoke for me, explaining that we understood completely, and were prepared to show how these accusations were fabricated. He pulled out the recovered text first, showing Tiara's original message suggesting someone should push Briley down the stairs. The panel passed it around, examining the timestamp and metadata, while Tiara's mom tried to say something, but the district representative told her to wait for their turn. Kaido explained in simple terms how he'd recovered the deleted message, and showed his timeline proving when each screenshot was really created. The assistant principals asked technical questions that Kaido answered calmly without getting flustered or defensive. Tiara's parents started looking uncomfortable when Kaido showed how their daughter's Instagram posts contradicted her story. Her dad kept rubbing his face while her mom gripped her purse so tight her knuckles went white. The district rep turned to Tiara and asked her to explain the metadata problems Kaido had shown them. Tiara's face went red and she started talking fast about how she didn't understand all that computer stuff, but she knew what messages she got. Her mom leaned forward trying to help, but the district rep held up her hand and said Tiara needed to answer for herself. Tiara kept looking at her parents, then back at the panel, while she tried to explain why the timestamps didn't match up with when she said things happened. She said maybe her phone clock was wrong or the screenshots got messed up somehow, but couldn't give any real answers that made sense. The more she talked, the more confused she sounded until she finally just stopped talking and stared at the table. Principal Porter picked up a paper and started reading the anonymous witness statement out loud about what happened at lunch that day. The witness described exactly what Tiara had said about pushing Briley down the stairs and how I'd told her that was messed up and to stay away from Briley. Tiara's head snapped up and she said the person must have heard wrong or misunderstood what was talked about. The assistant principal asked her to explain what was really said then if the witness got it wrong. Tiara opened her mouth, then closed it again and looked at her parents for help, but they just sat there looking sick. She mumbled something about discussing Briley's situation in general, but couldn't explain why someone would think she suggested pushing her. Her dad put his head in his hands and didn't look up again for the rest of the meeting. The panel then brought up the smiley face text Tiara sent me after I got escorted out by police. They wanted to know why she would send that right after such a serious situation. Tiara's voice got higher as she claimed it was meant for someone else, and she accidentally sent it to me instead. When they asked who it was supposed to go to, she couldn't give a name and said she didn't remember. The district rep pointed out how cruel it seemed to send that emoji to someone who just got removed from the school for something they didn't do. Everyone in the room went quiet for a minute, and I could see Tiara's mom finally understanding what her daughter had done. Principal Porter cleared his throat and said they had one more statement to read, which was from Briley herself. My heart started beating faster as he read Briley's words apologizing for not standing up for me when everything first happened. She wrote that she was scared and confused and didn't know what to think, but she knew I'd always supported her pregnancy and never showed any jealousy or anger about it. She said I was the only person besides her grandmother who actually helped her prepare for the baby and asked for the no-contact order to be lifted so we could talk. Hearing Briley finally tell the truth made my eyes water, but I blinked hard to stop from crying in front of everyone. The panel said they needed to take a 15-minute break to discuss everything, and we all had to wait in the hallway. Tiara's parents pulled her to the side near the water fountain, and I could see them whispering intensely, while Tiara kept shaking her head and wiping her eyes. Her mom's face looked angry now instead of confused, and her dad kept gesturing with his hands like he was trying to understand something. When we went back into the room, Tiara looked smaller somehow and wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. The district rep asked if she had anything else to add, and Tiara's voice was barely above a whisper when she said she might have misremembered some things about what happened. She said she was upset about Briley's situation and got confused about who said what, but she stopped before actually admitting she lied. Her parents looked defeated as they sat there realizing their daughter had caused all this trouble for nothing. The panel told us they needed to deliberate and make their decision, so we had to wait in separate rooms. Hallie came with me to an empty classroom where I paced back and forth while my brain kept thinking of all the worst things that could happen. She kept telling me we'd presented strong evidence and the panel seemed to understand what really happened, but I couldn't stop worrying they might not believe us. Owen stayed with my parents going over his notes and preparing for whatever decision came next. After what felt like forever, but was really about an hour, we got called back to the conference room. Principal Porter stood up and said that after reviewing all the evidence, they found insufficient proof to support the threat accusations against me. My emergency removal was lifted immediately, though they recommended I take a 2-week cooling-off period before returning to the school. The relief hit me so hard I had to grab the table to stay standing, but it wasn't complete relief because I knew this whole mess would follow me around. They weren't done though, because Tiara was getting consequences too, including social probation and mandatory counseling. Plus, she had to do some digital citizenship program about online behavior. Her parents looked completely devastated as they realized their daughter had orchestrated this entire crisis and almost ruined my life over nothing. Tiara still wouldn't look at me and kept her eyes on her hands folded in her lap. Owen immediately started filling out paperwork to get all the disciplinary records about this removed from my file. The school agreed since they admitted proper evidence procedures weren't followed at the beginning when they just took Tiara's word without investigating. It was a small victory, but important for my future college applications and everything else. We walked outside the building into the bright sunlight, and that's when everything hit me all at once. I started crying hard in Mom's arms while she held me tight and kept saying it was over now and I was safe. Dad stood nearby talking with Owen about what we needed to do next and making sure everything was properly documented. The weight of the past weeks crashed down on me, but at least I was cleared and people believed me and I could go back to the school eventually. That evening, my phone rang while I was lying on my bed staring at the ceiling. The caller ID showed it was Briley's grandmother, and my stomach twisted into knots. I picked up the phone and her soft voice came through saying Briley wanted to see me when I felt ready. My throat got tight and I gripped the phone harder. The hurt from Briley not believing me at first still burned in my chest. I told her grandmother I needed a few days to think about everything, but I still cared about both of them. She said she understood and hung up quietly. My phone buzzed with a text from Kaido saying he was proud of how I handled the hearing. He offered to help me catch up on all the computer science work I'd missed during the suspension. Another notification popped up as Natalie added me to a group chat called We Believe You, with other yearbook staff members. I scrolled through the messages and saw names of people who'd been supporting me behind the scenes this whole time. My eyes got watery seeing how many classmates actually believed my side of the story. The next morning, Mom brought me a printed email from the school district about updating their digital evidence policies. They didn't mention any names, but the changes were clearly because of what happened with my case. The new rules required actual device examination instead of just screenshots for serious accusations. At least other students wouldn't go through what I did with fake evidence. 2 weeks passed slowly with me doing schoolwork from home and trying to prepare mentally for going back. The cooling off period felt both too long and too short at the same time. I spent hours catching up on assignments with Kaido's help over video calls. Natalie sent me yearbook photos to edit so I could still contribute even while away from the school. Finally, the day came to return, and my hands shook as Mom drove me to the front entrance. Walking through those doors felt like entering a different world than the one I'd left. Some kids immediately came up apologizing for believing Tiara's lies without questioning them. Others turned away and pretended not to see me walking down the hall. A few acted completely normal, like nothing had ever happened, which felt the strangest of all. The best news came when someone mentioned Tiara had transferred to a private school across town. Not having to see her face made everything so much easier to handle. During first period, the teacher welcomed me back without making a big deal about it. At lunch, I sat alone at first until Kaido and Natalie joined me with their trays. We talked about normal stuff like upcoming tests and weekend plans instead of the drama. Walking to my next class, I had to pass the staircase near the science wing. This was the spot where Tiara claimed I'd planned to push Briley down the steps. I stopped and looked at those concrete stairs for a long moment. Instead of anger, I just felt sad about how one person's lies almost destroyed everything. I forced myself to keep walking and focus on moving forward with my life. 3 days later, I finally felt ready to see Briley and texted her grandmother. We arranged to meet at her house that weekend when I could handle the emotions better. Saturday afternoon, I stood on their porch with my finger hovering over the doorbell for a full minute. The door opened and there was Briley with tears already running down her face. We both started crying before either of us could say a single word. She pulled me inside and showed me her growing baby bump, which was much bigger now. She grabbed my hand and placed it on her stomach so I could feel the baby moving. We sat on the couch and she showed me a notebook full of baby names she'd been considering. She pointed to Leona and Sophia as her top choices for the little girl. We weren't ready to be best friends again, but we were starting to heal the damage. 3 weeks passed and I'd settled into a new routine at the school with my expanded friend group. A letter arrived at my house with Tiara's name on the return address. Mom wanted to throw it away, but Owen said I should read it for legal protection. Inside was a typed apology that her counseling program required her to write to me. The words felt empty and forced, like she was just checking off a requirement. She wrote about being sorry for the misunderstanding, but never admitted to lying on purpose. Owen told me to accept it formally in writing to protect myself if she tried anything again. I wrote a brief response saying I received her apology and expected no further contact between us. Natalie invited me to join the yearbook staff officially since I'd been helping during my suspension. We started working on a special feature about student rights and what to do if falsely accused. The administration clearly didn't love the idea, but they couldn't stop us from educating other students. We interviewed Owen about due process and included information about preserving evidence and getting advocates. The article would run in the next issue to help protect future students from similar situations. Briley started eating lunch with our group, which now included Kaido, Natalie, and a few others. Our friendship felt different now with more boundaries, but maybe more honesty too. She told us the baby was definitely a girl and asked if I'd help plan the baby shower. I said yes, but knew things would never be exactly like before between us. My parents finally stopped checking on me constantly and asking if I was okay every hour. They told me they were proud of how I'd fought for myself through everything. Dad even made a joke about me becoming a lawyer someday after seeing me handle the hearing. Life slowly returned to something that felt almost normal, even though everything had changed. The experience taught me about documenting everything and standing up for truth even when nobody believes you. Most importantly, I learned that real friends will eventually see through lies if you keep fighting. The nightmare was over, and I could finally breathe again without that weight on my chest. 2 weeks later, Principal Porter called my parents asking for a meeting about new school policies. We sat in his office while he explained how the district was making all administrators take training on digital evidence and false accusations. He looked directly at me and said he should have investigated more before taking such drastic action. The apology felt weird after everything, but Mom squeezed my hand under the table. He showed us the new protocols they'd created requiring actual device examination and multiple witness statements before any emergency removals. The training materials even used my case as an example of what not to do, though they didn't use my name. 6 weeks passed and I'd caught up on all my missed work with help from Kaido and Natalie. My grades were back to normal and the panic attacks that used to hit me in the hallways had mostly stopped. Hallie still checked in with me every week, but our sessions got shorter since I didn't need as much help anymore. I'd learned to spot my triggers and had ways to calm myself down when things got overwhelming. The breathing exercises she taught me actually worked, and I used them before every test. One Tuesday morning, Briley's grandmother called my mom's phone at 5 a.m. Briley was in labor 2 months early and wanted me at the hospital. I threw on clothes and Mom drove me there while I texted everyone that the baby was coming. The maternity ward smelled like cleaning products, and we found Briley's room where she was gripping the bed rails through contractions. Her grandmother stepped back so I could take Briley's hand, which she squeezed. So hard I thought my fingers would break. The nurses kept checking monitors and saying the baby's heart rate looked good despite being premature. Briley screamed through another contraction and I wiped her forehead with a cold washcloth. After 3 hours of pushing, her daughter arrived weighing 4 pounds and crying loud enough to fill the whole room. We both started sobbing when the nurse placed the tiny baby on Briley's chest. She was perfect with 10 fingers and 10 toes, even though she'd have to stay in the NICU for a few weeks. At the end of the school year, they held an awards ceremony in the gym. I sat with my parents not expecting anything until they called my name for the Digital Citizenship and Student Advocacy Award. Walking to the podium, my legs shook like that first day in Principal Porter's office, but for totally different reasons. Briley sat in the front row holding her baby who was finally home from the hospital. My parents were taking pictures and Kaido and Natalie cheered from the bleachers. The principal handed me the plaque and I managed to say thank you without my voice cracking. After the ceremony, Briley found me outside and said she'd named her daughter Hope. She explained it was because I gave her hope when everyone else judged her for getting pregnant at 16. We talked about starting community college together in the fall, with her grandmother watching Hope during classes. Our friendship felt stronger now after going through hell and coming out the other side. That summer, Owen called about a peer counselor position at his nonprofit for students facing false accusations. He said my experience would help others going through the same nightmare of not being believed. I accepted, immediately remembering how alone I'd felt during those weeks of suspension. The training started the next month and I met other kids who'd been through similar situations. We shared our stories and learned how to support people without giving legal advice. My first case was a girl accused of cheating on a test, and I helped her document everything and find an advocate. Looking back at everything that happened, I learned so much about protecting myself. You have to document every conversation and save every text, even if it seems pointless at the time. Standing up for the truth matters even when nobody believes you at first, because real friends will eventually see through the lies. The whole experience made me stronger than I ever thought I could be. Now my life feels genuinely good with friends who stood by me when it mattered most. Briley and I hang out with Hope almost every day, and she's already smiling at us. My work with the nonprofit gives me purpose, helping kids who feel as lost as I did. Sometimes the worst things that happen to you end up teaching you the most important lessons about who you really are. Thanks for letting me question things right alongside you. It's been a ride just wondering together. Until next time, take care out there. Like the video, it helps more than you think.